employment, and if they can't come out of their houses and earn, then that's a huge issue, isn't it?
That's the thing. So when you go basically to the laws and you strict women, no, you don't have a right to work, you stay at home, and then who is going to provide meals for them, right? So women headed households are there and they find. So as a result, what happened? Okay, no right to work, so you stay at home. If you study grade 8, that's enough, grade 10, that's enough, you don't have to study. So the education of the Muslim women also affected due to that. It's interconnected. So as a result, what happened now in North and East, especially North, all the people who have resettled in Mullaitiba and all, they, though there are many jobs in the private sector, they are not skilled. They don't have education, right? So they're basically based on the agricultural sector. So whereas there are lots of land issues, and which government should, they don't have land or land ownership, and then they don't know anything else to do. They can do only, animal husbandry kind of thing. So they face lots of issues in that way. So practically, that's an issue not only for the Muslim women, that is also for the Tamil women in North and East, the land issues. But Muslim women, as they have more restrictions, saying that you can't. Say, for example, if it's very easy for a Sinhala girl or a Tamil girl to work in far place, a distance place, but Muslims, they say, no, you have to come back home. You rarely see Muslim women staying in some other districts and working, right? So there are some other restrictions also. No, it should be like, no, you have to be back home before 6, before 5. So, and Tamil Sinhala women, they are very courageous. And I'm not saying Muslim women are not courageous, but they choose. If you want to work in a, for example, simple, say a communication center, they are ready to work there, cashier or someone like that. But you very rarely see Muslim women in those areas. If it's a teacher, if it's a nurse, if it's an attendant at a hospital, they are fine. But beyond that, right, they have a restriction. Okay, only these are the jobs that we can do. That is totally socially constructed. So those obstacles are there for women.
Of course. So now we've touched on some of the issues, and it's not for a lack of jobs, because there are plenty of jobs that women can do, as you're both mentioned, but you don't see women participating in those jobs. And actually in the Jaffna province, Jaffna district, when you speak about the unemployment rate of men, it's less than 4%. So in comparison to women's, which are much higher, it's above 20%. So when you take these things into context, now we know what the issues are, but what are the policies that we can put in place to address this? When you speak about breaking a social stereotype, that's not easy. That's very hard to do, and it's something that's been built up over centuries, it's a culture, way of life now. So how can you go about, somehow chipping away at this huge barrier that's in front of you?
There are two, you can analyze it in two ways. One is the institutional and structural barriers, and other one is the social barriers. Social barriers, of course, you have to try give awareness, change their mindset up and the perspectives, right, to encourage women and to do those work. But institutional or the structural, there are different things. For example, if you take North and East, especially North, there are laws that's highly discriminating women. For example, Tesawala Code. I think Vasugi can tell more about that, the impacts, right? Okay. So where a woman cannot sell her own property, she needs the signature of the husband or the consent of the husband, right? Her own property. So those laws, and if you see Muslim women also, the inheritance, it's a problem, like how the way that is said, it's not done according to the law. Okay, so those laws, and if you see structural impediments, how the government sector is helping women to improve. For example, say there's a village, you give them one woman, she was actually telling me the example, right? She can stitch well, so they give a sewing machine to her, and they give 5-10 other women, okay, you'll also, right, empowerment, giving machines, which then you are trying to
create an opportunity there.
You're trying to, the purpose
competition
right.
between women. When because in a village which is only populated with 75 families, and so then you have one tailor, it's sufficient, or maybe 2 tailors. But when you are giving 10 machine to 10 women, they compete with each other, and all of them lose their income.
Yes.
So it's similar, like the approaches the government or the non-governmental agencies take are having some impacts in the life of women. So it has to be like, it has to be visioned in a long term, sort of like they have to adapt a long term visioning approach, and also have to consider the history and the background and the context of where that woman is living. So the other important one of the major, another, like we were discussing about that key issue in this problem is that women who were traditionally engaged in some sort of livelihood, mostly in handicraft and agricultural industries, they were like, take north and east, there were multiple displacement, and it's not just the physical displacement. They were displaced from their traditional knowledge and skills, as well as the resources they were using for their own livelihood. Take like during tsunami, people were they were moved from the sea further inland. Yes. So men can go still and use their boats and fish, but women don't have access to those places. And the women who were doing dry fish businesses, yes, and also like doing small fish marketing, like they buy and sell in some other places, they didn't have access because they don't ride bicycle, they don't have a motorbike to go and purchase that and bring it back. And then also with the open economy, the whole fish brought to the land by men is taken immediately by the big sellers, like somebody from big like cities come and purchase it. So the women they lost the whole share they had historically. Yes. So it's like it's a displacement of their traditional skills, knowledge, and their livelihood. Similarly, like you will see plenty of such examples in all over the north and east, and maybe that's same in other parts of country. Like in Batticaloa, like I was telling that example before also. In Batticaloa is very popular for mat weaving and weaving, like clothes. Okay. We are very popular. Like throughout the history, people used to praise the weaving of Batticaloa. But you don't like mostly women are into those industries. No, women were the weavers, and now it's hardly you see any women weaving mats, and mostly those are the women, and Muslim women mostly. Those are the ones going as migrant workers to Middle East. The problem is, like when you go into the actual sort of problem, they don't get market. They used to sell it locally, and all the local residents now they purchase plastic mats instead of local weave. So, and similar when a woman is given with a cow, nobody drinks milk, fresh milk. So it's like it's the approach. It has to come through the policies. How we are going to encourage the products made by women, the traditional knowledge and skills women had, and how we are going to encourage the local population to live on that, as well as how we are going to encourage that to spread out. So that has to be definitely the policies, and it has to be systematically done in a way that so that women are also confident enough to be into that entrepreneurships again, instead of going as garment workers or migrant workers. So those are the things like has to come from both ways.
Exactly. So it's a very situation specific solution that we're looking for here in different parts of Sri Lanka. So we'll be speaking more about these issues as well as the importance of education in terms of bringing up livelihoods of girls and women everywhere in the country. So we'll be speaking more and touching more on these topics. It's a very interesting discussion. I'm sure that you would also like to know more about these issues and what's happening here in our country to help the women of our country. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our discussion. The issue at hand today is the fact that Sri Lankan women are showing one of the lowest rates of labour force participation among South Asian countries. So what are the reasons? What are the reasons for this low rate, and how can we address this particular issue in the Sri Lankan context, taking into account what we can learn from our history as well as what other countries have implemented in this sphere as well? So we have our expert panel of women. They've been sharing so many insights with us about the situation at hand, and some of the things that even I learned sitting here on this sofa. I mean, it's so true when you think about the perspective that you are bringing in here. But we have Madhiya Ahmed. Now, she's been a program specialist for a lot of international organizations as well. Now, you've worked in Pakistan with certain issues that are similar to what women here in Sri Lanka face. Now, I'm sure that as a developing country, both Sri Lanka and Pakistan show certain signs, that red flags that you can look out for and then try to address. So, Madhiya, in your work, what have you come across as the glaring issues and barriers when it comes to the participation of women in the labor force?
So one of the challenges, and I believe Hasna referred to this, is that when you look at women's outcomes in general, you have in certain countries, for instance, you have, and in Pakistan this is the same way, and in other countries, that for instance, let's take school completion. You have women girls completing at a much lower rate than boys.
Yes.
But however, those who do complete, when you compare men and women tend to, on average, have higher achievement rates.
I see.
So it's interesting, that dichotomy, and that has a significant impact, of course, on your ability to participate in the workforce, because the skills that you bring are, again, if you have to drop out of school because you're taking care of your younger siblings, not even your children, or because of other responsibilities, then when you go out into the market, you have less to offer. And often the big disparity across women in different countries in terms of their attainment comes down to this. If they are forced to work, they get less pay, or they're in vulnerable positions when you compare the rates. Even in countries where there is not that much of a disparity between men's labor force participation or women, the share of women in vulnerable work is much, much higher, whereas the share of women in paid work is much lower. And that has implications on household welfare, because we find, again, research shows that if women are in paid work, they tend to be more empowered. And we know that women's empowerment actually leads to better household well-being. There's more investment in children's health and education, so it's a multi-generational effect. Yes. So in a way, what we're trying to do is find ways to improve women's opportunities and their decision making. And you have to be, and some of our research, for instance, in other countries, is looking at that tension between unpaid care work and their choices and ability to participate in the labor market. And what are the mechanisms? We talked about the private sphere and the public sphere, and what are the mechanisms to share that responsibility? Is that something that a community can do collectively? Is that something that the state can provide? Is that, what ways are there, and we're testing that in different countries, what ways are there that actually can help us lead to a solution or a better sharing of responsibilities?
Of course, and they say that if you educate a man, you're educating one person, but if you educate a girl, then you're educating the entire community. So that's very true, isn't it? Because the spillover that you get from an educated woman at the center of a household or at the center of an extended family has a large positive impact on her children as well as those around her. So that's very important. And in a country such as Sri Lanka, where we boast of free education, and we boast of a certain level of equality for women, actually, in comparison to other South Asian countries, maybe in terms of maternal care, things like that. We have some policies in place that are maybe better at addressing these issues than other countries. It's still so surprising for me to find that we have one of the lowest participation rates of women in the labor force among South Asian countries. So what do you think are other reasons that lead to it? Now, education, do you find that there is a barrier preventing girls from going to the school, as in just the transport as well as the distance, or is it something to do with having a more patriarchal society where they don't give a lot of importance to the education of women? Vasuki?
I think, as you said, the free education actually have given a lot of possibilities for women. And I think comparatively we don't have such big barriers for women to go to the education, at least to the primary level, as we see in other South Asian countries. So because of the free education, it's like you don't have to compete with your brother to pay. Like if you have a brother, in most of the cases, if you have to pay for one person, the family chooses to pay for the boy child rather than the girl child. So here we don't have that much of, even though the schools are a bit far from certain communities, we still have better situation compared to the other countries, that you have at least the primary schools closer to your homes in all over the country. So, but then the problem is again the attitude for what we are teaching our girls. What is the expectation we are giving to them? What are the dreams we are providing to them? So can she have an open dream of becoming something or someone through her education? For me, that's a big question. Even I didn't have that opportunity in my childhood. The dream I have was to become an artist, well-trained artist. But I didn't have an opportunity to that. When it comes to the higher education, I had to move to another country to study, because our country didn't have an opportunity for a Tamil-speaking person to study art in Tamil medium. So I had to go to India, which was not accepted by the family.
I see.
So, and it will be more hard for a family which cannot afford even that, like a school education in a city, and then like it goes, no, it like it multiplies to the people who are in a more disadvantaged position. So, and if it can be different for a man who is I had some friends who were trained under an art teacher, males, who they had the opportunity to explore, go outside the country and become artists, while I was sort of like moved into my sort of own ways to find my and it's always our own struggles.
Yes, it is always a struggle, isn't it?
It's always our own struggle. So it's my struggle as well as all our sisters.